Good afternoon. I would like to call the Public Planning Committee's December 16th meeting to order. Krista, have we complied with FOIA?
Yes, sir, we have.
Thank you very much. And Krista, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mrs. Becker,
Here.
Mr. Stanford,
Here.
Mr. Ames,
Here. And I understand Tom Lennox, the alternate, is also in attendance. And are there any recommended changes to the very voluminous agenda?
Move compression is necessary.
Is there a second? Alex, Tammy, a second?
No, second, sorry, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes of November 18th?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second,
Yeah, all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Passes very much. We welcome the public comments that are requested today and politely remind citizens to speak respectfully and civilly and have their comments last only 3 minutes. Krista, do we have anyone signed up for today?
yes, sir, we do. And our first citizen is Lucier, Mr. Lucier.
Yes, good afternoon.
Thank you,
My name
sir.
is Lee Lucier, and I'm the CEO of the Richardson Group. The Richardson Group, led by J.R. Richardson, is one of the longest-standing employers on Hilton Head Island and owns Coligny Plaza. Coligny Plaza has been in existence for over 65 years, and the business is owned by the people who live and work on Hilton Head Island. Due to the impacts of the Walker Report on beach parking in Coligny Plaza, our team enlisted the assistance of Desmond Consultants. Desmond specializes in parking matters, is deeply rooted in this space as a leading parking professional consultant firm. Desmond took a deep dive on the Walker Report and came back with several questions that the over 60 locally owned businesses in Coligny Plaza, Pope Avenue Corridor, and the Richardson Group would like to have answered. To that point, we would very much like to enter the report into the record and allow Desmond Consultants to speak on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucier. And yes, Josh, would you please have that report entered into the record and also, as timely as possible, send it out to the members of council?
Yes, sir. We will make sure to do that as soon as we receive it.
Thanks very much.
Sir, our next citizen is Christian Luz. Mr. Luz,
Yes,
please proceed.
thank you, committee and council members, for allowing me an opportunity to comment on the parking study master plan. Again, my name is Christian Luz, and I'm a parking consultant with Desmond, a national parking planning and design firm. We were retained to review and comment on the methodology, findings, and recommendations of the report prepared by Walker Consultants. Our review is limited to the Walker Report in the public meeting that occurred on October 27th, 2020. First of all, the goals of the study remain unclear to us. Paid parking is typically one of several tools that is used to manage parking behavior. Paid parking provides a means to manage how and where short-term parkers, like shoppers and diners, and long-term parkers, like employees and beachgoers, is provided and how it's managed. However, paid parking cannot be successfully implemented without a structured enforcement program. We did not see indication of an effective enforcement program in the report. Without this element, there will be numerous negative unintended consequences. Secondly, the development of parking study recommendations are normally based on analysis of data, including quantification of public and private parking, measurement of hourly use, analysis of parking duration and turnover of space. This is in addition to identifying the user groups that should be served or could be impacted by parking proposals, such as businesses, residents, employees, diners, shoppers, visitors, and beachgoers. There are recommendations in the report based on assumptions without analytical support. There were no field surveys conducted regarding parking performance, the adequacy of parking, employee parking, visitor or shopper parking, or illegal parking. Consequently, we don't believe the analysis indicates how the introduction of paid parking would create a more efficient or effective parking system. So this takes me back to defining what the goal of the parking study was. Also, one of the side notes in the report was a discussion of the town's inventory obligations tied to a 1989 grant from the state for beach renourishment. The study indicated the town may have an existing parking supply deficiency in excess of 100 spaces relative to meeting the grant requirements. We believe this finding by Walker is critical and should be evaluated and satisfied before introducing radical changes in the management of the parking system. Finally, generally speaking, the report action plan and Walker's subsequent recommendations outline the tenets of a reasonable public parking plan in that it addresses aspects of operations, maintenance, finances, enforcement, and adjudication, but it's not complete or ready for implementation. It's our opinion that a structured parking enforcement program be employed for at least a year before paid parking is considered to ensure that sound investment in equipment, wayfinding, and management occurs, and that parking enforcement, fine collection, appeals, and the adjudication process is implemented and works well. Thank you for.
Thank you, Mr. Les. Miss Edwina Dunlop, Miss Dunlop?
Hi, Krista. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Public Planning Committee. I'm Edwina Dunlop, and I'm here representing the Hilton Head Residents Group working on the resolution of issues at Islanders Beach Park. 3 members of our group have previously spoken regarding the issues at Islanders Beach during the citizen comments period of the October 25th Community Services and Public Safety Committee and the November 16th Town Council regular meeting. We have submitted our transcripts of those comments to Chairman Ames and Town Clerk Krista Wiedemeyer and now ask they be placed in the public record of this December 16th meeting of the Public Planning Committee in lieu of repeating them again today. As part of our comments today, we would like to zero in on a few items, specifically asking this committee to, number 1, prepare the necessary resolution rededicating Islanders Beach Park to Hilton Head residents based on the comprehensive memo written by the town manager dated December 8th that includes every issue outlined in the residents' goal statement. Also, number 2, to immediately address the state's lack of response to months of inquiries regarding the removal of the parking meters. The method thus far that has been used to get the state to be responsive has clearly not worked. So in our view, a completely different approach must be immediately pursued to get the answers the town deserves. Those parking meters have been there for 11 years. It is past time for them to be removed or at the very least relocated somewhere else. Until the town finds a way to get DHEC to respond in a positive manner, this crucial part of our project remains on hold. And finally, number 3, to select a point person to keep the Islanders Beach Residents Group informed on the progress of this project. We know that government bureaucracy runs slowly, but we are quickly approaching the high season of 2022. We request members of the town council be mindful that time is growing short and to do whatever is necessary to assist town staff by providing clear policy decisions and removing roadblocks to progress. We hope to see a specific outcome on our goals for Islanders Beach Park by the January 2022 Town Council meetings. Thank you for your time and commitment to working with us on this important project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunlap. Sir, next is Patsy Bryson. Ms. Bryson?
Yes, good afternoon. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. My name is Patsy Bryson. I live in the South Forest Beach area. My husband and I are both active bicyclists, also active walkers in the South Forest Beach area along the multi-use pathways. So again, I'm here to speak about the e-bike regulation. First of all, in addition to being a bicyclist, I'm a retired attorney, having practiced over 30 years in North Carolina. I'm not licensed in South Carolina, so I'm not giving a legal opinion. But I do continue to believe that the staff attorney's interpretation of the statutes and the law in South Carolina with regard to regulation of e-bikes is inaccurate. The state has clearly not occupied the field. There's still clear room for the town of Hilton Head to continue to prohibit motorized bicycles on the multi-use pathways. What the state of South Carolina did was to say that for e-bikes, you don't have to have registration and license. So clearly, they did not occupy the field. I would compare this to a motor vehicle, to a car. The state has also regulated licensing and registration of cars, but that does not mean that the town cannot prohibit cars from riding down the multi-use pathways. The town also has authority to regulate parking and curb cuts and other ways of regulating vehicles. The state has occupied the field only in a limited way. So I would urge you to ask the staff attorney to revisit her opinion with regard to the regulations. I provided members of this committee with the analysis of the state statutory regulations. In addition, the SCDOT design manual provides that a shared use path, which is what we have, may be used by pedestrians, skaters, wheelchair users, joggers, and other non-motorized users. And since our pathways are primarily along the DOT right-of-way, it would seem as though the design manual should be clearly instructive in how to regulate motorized bicycles on our multi-use pathways, and that is to prohibit them. Finally, I've provided this committee with photos of pathways in the South Forest Beach area showing the width of them. Some of those pathways are as narrow as 4 feet 3 inches. That is clearly not a place for motorized bicycles or any other kind of motorized vehicles. Finally, there's also blind spots, and I provided photographs of those. If you can imagine during the summer, the amount of traffic, bicycle traffic and foot traffic we have on the multi-use pathways in the South Forest Beach area, and see children that I see riding on their bikes or riding behind their parents, and they're going to be run over by these heavy e-bikes. It is clearly an inherent dangerous situation, and the town needs to take notice of that. You should continue to prohibit e-bikes on the multi-use pathways. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bryson. And lastly, sir, we have Dustin Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Council, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Dustin Kennedy. I'm a real estate broker, investor, and owner of 2 short-term rentals here on Hilton Head Island. And I just wanted to kind of touch base with the short-term rental ordinance that you guys are looking at. As you know, Hilton Head Island has approximately 2.5 million visitors per year, and they all need somewhere to stay. So during the summertime, there are at times approximately 300,000 visitors on the island. Because of the 2.5 million visitors, there are jobs that are provided, whether it's in the hospitality industry, construction, entertainment, or just the necessities like healthcare and first responders. Many people over the past 30 years have chosen to travel to Hilton Head to stay at the resorts, hotels, and some vacation rentals. Over the last 10 years, and especially over the last 5 years, there's been a shift in what people want. People want to enjoy their vacations as families and extended families. People don't want to have to rent multiple rooms in a hotel just to have their families all together. And this has especially been proven during the COVID pandemic that we've been in. They want to stay in homes and they want to live like they do at home. So according to AirDNA, which is a global analytics company that analyzes 10 million Airbnb and vacation rental by owners in more than 120,000 towns in our world, Hilton Head Island has about 7,279 homes that are displayed as rentals on either Airbnb or VRBO. Of those 7,279, only 671 of those have 5 bedrooms or more, and that's less than 10% of the entire amount. 63% of those homes that are rentals on Hilton Head Island appear to be having 3 bedrooms or less. So from the discussion, from kind of my research, it looks like the target is on short-term rentals, but it's also on larger short-term rentals. And so the proposed solution would limit the larger homes on the island. The last thing I want you to kind of consider is, the fact that a lot of the complaints typically start from full-time residents that are there the entire year. Those residents pay a 4% tax in the state of South Carolina, and that is it. I own 2 properties on the island. Both are in communities that are predominantly short-term rental. And in those communities, everybody that has a short-term rental, they pay 6% property tax. We pay 3% hospitality or accommodation tax to the town, 8% sales tax to the state, and then the proposed business license tax for 2022. So, one thing I would consider is the fact that the tax basis for a lot of the guests that are coming in, the short-term rentals that are on the island, they're definitely.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Please wrap it up.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Sir, that concludes appearance by citizens.
Thank you very much, Krista. Appreciate that. Moving on to unfinished business. First item is a parking study master plan. Staff recommends that the committee authorize the continued pursuit and implementation of a comprehensive beach parking master plan with next steps consisting of the development and issuance of a public solicitation for beach parking management services. It's my understanding that along with that RFQ, staff is also asking to move forward with an operational capacity enhancements. I see both these items as a part of the research to implement a pragmatic beach management parking plan. Josh, I believe you are going to make a brief presentation of slides and getting to page 14 and 15 dealing with the request for action.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Is everybody able to see that?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. We'll go ahead and kind of move through this at a relatively brisk pace.
Yeah, and any member of the committee, if you have a question, let's interrupt Josh to deal with the question at that moment. Thank you.
Please, yes, please and thank you. So I want to start off today just going over a quick overview of the presentation that we are prepared to provide today. We're going to do just a quick slide on the project history. We have also prepared for you an anticipated project timeline that is certainly subject to future actions with regards to items that are reviewed and considered by this committee and by town council. But at this point, we have put together a timeline that kind of outlines how we see this moving forward if we are to get to the point where we actually are implementing some of the recommendations. I'm going to briefly highlight just some of the stakeholder feedback that we've received. At our last meeting, we were challenged with going back out and continuing to gather some additional comments from various stakeholder groups and entities. We've compiled that information and have it included in today's presentation for you. And then lastly, as the chairman indicated, we have a staff request of the committee today that we would like to propose and then answer any questions or comments that you may have regarding that request. So again, the project history, the town issued a request for a comprehensive beach parking master plan. It was awarded to Walker and Associates and approved by town council on October 12th, 2020. Since that time, there's been several committee meetings to discuss that report and its recommendations. Most recently, staff was tasked with holding a series of stakeholder engagement sessions On November 15th, we met with members of the public at the Low Country Celebration Park, and then again at the Hilton Head Library to get their comments and feedback. We've combined that information with some of the previous feedback that we've received from Walker and Associates as part of their efforts. And we've taken that information and kind of compiled it into several main themes that have come out as a part of these discussions. Here you see kind of our anticipated project timeline with the actions that have been completed, those that are currently ongoing, and what we see as kind of the next steps. As the chairman indicated, what we believe that to be is essentially moving forward with issuing a request for qualifications to identify a qualified vendor. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that here in just a minute. And then beyond that, we have then the selection of the contractor, the development of a policy framework with the committee and town council, and then ultimately contract execution and program implementation. So in mentioning the next steps, we've already completed the listen and learn. We've gathered public comment and feedback through virtual stakeholder meetings that occurred as a result of the pandemic, an open town hall portal that received 860 citizen comments, and then also a number of public workshops and meetings, most recently as indicated at Low Country Celebration Park and the Hilton Head Library. The themes that have come about as a result of gathering these comments essentially surround the following areas: parking capacity, impacts to surrounding properties, shuttle transportation, communication, and ultimately enforcement. And then the last one that is kind of, it's tied into this program, but it's also kind of separate, is discussion of the beach parking pass criteria. I'm not going to spend any time on that today, as I know Jeff Buckaloo is going to be taking that up as part of his presentation here in a little bit. I also wanted to make a note that we were aware that the private sector has commissioned an assessment of the Walker report. As Mr. Lucier indicated in the public comments today, it appears that assessment has been completed, and we are looking forward to receiving it so that we can review its comments and incorporate it into our discussions.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Gruber, that assessment, I understand that you're going to enter that in the public record and send it to us. Will we have to wait until our next discussion on this matter before you can give us at least some preliminary answers to, I think Mr. Lucier said that there were questions within that assessment. Is there any way that when you send it out to us, you take some time to review it, and if there are any answers that you could give clarity to, provide that at that time?
Sure. If that's the will of the committee, I will certainly work with the town manager on making that happen.
Yes, I would make the same request, and to the degree that you could have that be as objective and non-defensive as possible and as quick as possible, I think it could allow us to move forward with some confidence in whatever direction we choose.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Ms. Becker, I believe you're on mute.
So there's been twice now mention of capacity. First in the chairman's opening comments with regard to a capacity enhancement, and now the first bullet in your last slide mentioned capacity. Are you going to speak more to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually the slide that I have pulled up.
The next slide. Okay, perfect.
Yes, ma'am. So, and this is more just kind of an acknowledgement. Again, we've organized all of the public feedback that we've received into these themes, one of which that we received a number of comments about was capacity, or probably characterized maybe a little bit better, the lack of capacity. I think in a lot of areas, not only to include Coligny, but Islanders Beach Park, the amount of demand that is present at certain points in time exceeds the amount of capacity that we have to provide parking spaces. And so that's really what these comments seem to be highlighting, is that we should be taking proactive steps to identify ways in which we can create additional capacity through our various capital improvement plans, any capital projects that we might undertake. It's an opportunity to try to address that through those actions. So you can see here, and I don't necessarily want to read for you the comments, they're in the presentation and they're in the backup that you have, but you can see here that these comments that we received from the public and from citizens were basically centered around the fact that there is a need for more parking at certain locations and particularly at certain times of the year.
And so just jumping in there and trying to comment as we go, we either become a paved parking lot or we retain the more natural environment of our island. And one should also remember that each time we create or would consider creating parking spaces, we're taking away from opportunities for any number of things, pickleball, more fields, just a natural environment for walking in and enjoying our island. So for me, it's been a long-standing opinion that creating more parking by expanding the pavement is really, again, for me, a non-starter.
Thank you. Go ahead, Josh.
So the next key theme that we heard from folks was impacts to adjacent properties. This is certainly a very prevalent concern. I think you heard some more about that today during the public comments of today's meeting. But essentially, folks want to ensure that if we are going to put in place parking regulations, paid parking, and similar things like that, that we have the ability to control or respond adequately to any kind of impacts to adjacent properties that may occur as a result of imposing or putting into place those regulations. Part of how we plan on addressing that is with the selection of a consultant who has experience in many different issues of parking management, not only from a technical aspect, but also from a management aspect and also an enforcement aspect, because that somebody who has that experience in a real world setting can work with us to help define a scope of work that's going to meet the needs of our specific community. The next area that we heard comments on was with regards to shuttle transportation. And essentially, I would characterize these comments as centering around the fact that we need to create more opportunities for beach shuttle, encourage people to use the remote parking lot at USCB and potentially other places when parking lots become full. But in order to encourage people to do that, we have to make it a convenient experience, an experience that meets their needs and helping to transport both them and their beach gear to the beach in a comfortable and efficient manner. Those are all things that we're kind of incorporating into our operational improvements that we're continuing to work on as staff. But we've heard from the public that this is something that we should continue to support and continue to improve as we move forward.
David, as part of that, I think that we need to make sure we're including Come Out a Breeze in this discussion and that we encourage them to modify their current shuttle buses so that it can accommodate the type of gear that people take to the beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Go ahead, Josh.
Additionally, the themes that we heard were centered around communication. This took on multiple aspects, not only how we communicate with the visitors that are coming here, but how we also then communicate practical information such as parking availability or non-availability. And so communication really kind of has a fairly broad umbrella, but we heard about it from multiple people that we need to make sure that in what we're putting in place and how we're carrying it out, we are effectively communicating with the public about the program and then about the actual individual aspects of parking management. And then lastly, enforcement. This is something that continues to be a preeminent matter for people. They want to make sure that if we're going to put something in place, that it's actually going to achieve the goals that we have in terms of regulating parking, addressing those spillover effects, any kind of impacts to adjoining property owners, and then ultimately, how do we use enforcement as a tool to encourage people to have good behavior? You know, how can we encourage them to park in areas where we want them to park, to not park in areas where we don't want them to park, to just be a way to influence and change their behaviors through our enforcement mechanisms. So those were ultimately all of the comments that we received, kind of bundled up into those particular areas. I also mentioned that the beach parking pass criteria, particularly at our Hilton Head Library meeting, we heard from a number of folks regarding the Islanders Beach Park and the ability to make Islanders for the use of island residents. Again, I don't want to get into that too deep today, just because I know Jeff Buckaloo is going to be covering this in fairly good detail as part of his presentation, but we wanted to acknowledge that we did hear those comments. We have captured them as part of our record keeping purposes and have included them here in this presentation.
Thank you, Josh.
So this is what we wanted to focus a good bit of our time on today with regards to this issue. And this is kind of staff's request to the committee. Where we are at is looking for your support in moving forward with developing and issuing a request for qualifications. What this means is we are looking to find a firm that exists that has superior experience in all aspects of a comprehensive parking program. We've talked about many of these aspects previously, and they're contained within the Walker report. Now we want to find somebody who's actually taken these things and put them into use in the real world. And our thought being that if we can identify a well-qualified vendor that we can partner with, they can help us scope the different aspects of this program that we will actually be implementing, because they can provide us with that direct experience and the feedback that they've had on what's been successful, what's been not successful, and really kind of help us fill in those gaps so that we know by the time we hit the go button, we've got a program in place that we are confident will be successful.
David, I have a comment on that, if I might. I think that.
Wait, just a second, please, Glenn.
Sure.
Is that the only thing that you're requesting of us today?
In terms of committee action, yes. I think you did mention operational things. Those are things that we are continuing to do as staff. So we're notifying you that they're kind of ongoing in nature. So I've got another slide on that I'll touch on here in a minute.
Okay, go ahead, Glenn.
Thank you. It looks to me like the categories for the RFQ are inclusive and will provide us the information that we need. My biggest concern is it looks like there's an extended time frame. I'm wondering if we can't request a bid within 30 days rather than in 60 days from a contractor like this, particularly considering the fact that we're in the off season for everybody. That said, if a motion's in order, I'll be glad to make the motion.
Yes, I would appreciate that, and then we can have a discussion.
Thank you. I would move that the committee direct town staff to develop and issue an RFQ, request for qualification, about these parking issues encompassing the various categories that are shown as step 2A in this presentation.
Thank you, Glenn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Alex, would you like to lead off with any comments that you might have?
Yes, I guess the most important part of this listing to me is in the first bullet there, the but not limited to, because I think we have done the best that we can with trying to get our arms around this, but I'm sure there are some other nuances, other unintended consequences and that sort of thing that we have yet to stumble across. I won't bore us with my personal list of them, but I would want to take the time to just make one example. I know that this paid parking program is going to be mostly viewed as a revenue stream. However, I'm not sure that all of our facilities necessarily at this moment offer themselves to be such. Okay, we have festivals, we have fundraising events and that sort of thing. And typically those events are free parking. I just have some concern there. And I also agree with Councilman Stanford, the connection between whomever this firm and what they are recommending and suggested being tied to the transportation service that is in place right now with Pomelo Breeze is a must. We can't have them being competing entities. They need to be, in a lot of cases, one of the same. So those are my brief comments at the moment. I'm looking forward to us engaging and getting smarter about this. And ultimately, if it's a point that we are still not very confident, there's nothing wrong with us moving towards a pilot program, in my mind, so that we try it and then get it right. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Tamara?
Moving forward to see how this would all be implemented, what it would cost the town. I don't personally see it as a revenue stream, but a solution to an ever increasing problem that we have with regard to folks coming onto the island and needing to put their cars somewhere, which limits our residents from having the same opportunity in many instances. And I understand that there are positives of all the folks coming on the island. I'm not saying I don't want them there. They're welcome. We love having them. But I do say that we at times need to think about how we preserve the integrity and character of our island and protect our residents and allow them to use this space as islanders first, always. So that's really all I have to say at this point.
Thank you very much. Glenn?
I think I've stated my position on this.
Okay.
I want us to proceed with the RFQ, and I want us to proceed with all urgent timing we could possibly draw out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just make a couple of brief comments. One, I'm looking at this as a resource. I'm learning. I don't understand all the push and pulls, the consequences, the unintended consequences. I think we have a highly complex issue on the island with a lot of competing goals. And so I'm hoping that this consultant will be able to guide us and differentiate or at least separate those competing elements so that we begin to understand what our priorities must be, can be, should be. So I'm looking at this as a way to define a scope of work as a first step and not as a necessary commitment. And I would resist to give the impression to the public today that this is a commitment to implementing something that we don't understand today. So having said that,
Can I
Chris,
just
okay.
picking up on what you said? So in my mind, listening to you versus what this authorization to proceed is, this is to develop a request that would require the ability to provide the services, not someone to come in and overview and consult with us. So maybe that's what the but not limited to is, an additional advice.
I just see this as an opportunity to better understand, and where it ends up, I don't know at this point. But essentially, we're going out with an RFQ to find the best person to give us that, in my opinion, resource advice, but also the capability to implement a program if council at some point says that's what we want to do.
I could see that under, but not limited to. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Krista, would you call the roll on this question, please?
Certainly, sir. Mr. Brown,
Support.
Mrs. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Stanford,
Yes,
Mr. Ames.
Yes, passes unanimously. Thank you, Krista.
Thank you.
The next item on the unfinished business, the discussion of beach planning and facilities update. This largely has to do with the Islanders Beach. Jeff, you can proceed with your presentation. Again, it's a very comprehensive presentation. You've done an outstanding job. Staff has done an outstanding job, not only in listening to the public, but putting all those thoughts in an organized fashion. So congratulations on that. We have had a fair amount of this presentation before, so I'm just asking, to the extent that you can move through old information quickly and concentrate on new information. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Chairman Ames, thank you, and I understand that, and be glad to share my screen. Let me know.
have it.
Yep.
If we have it. Okay, very good. Yeah, as Mr. Ames mentioned, this has been before committee already. First thing I want to talk about here today is an overview of, hold on, what we are, oops. My apologies, I'm trying to, there you go, okay. Yeah, what we're going to talk about today, the purpose and need for this agenda item, the background and history, the public input we've received and will continue to receive, benchmarking, trying to see what other similar communities do about this same issue. The policy framework before you today. At the end of the slide presentation, I have some motion options. There are a handful of those, and you can select all or some of those to make motions on today. Communication and marketing strategy. We keep hearing how important that is, and we understand and appreciate that, and we'll do our best to make that a key issue going forward once we resolve the new policies and make sure the public understand those. Facility improvements. We've assessed all of these beach parks and islanders, mostly to look at all the improvements we can make to bring it up to date and to add new amenities and function and more parking. That's a huge one for the citizens. I have a timeline slide to show where we're at, where we need to get to on the policy items and the infrastructure improvements. The committee action is the motion slide I've alluded to. And then, the path forward, what we want to do next. All right, the purpose and need. When Mark came to work here for the town, the beach experience, he quickly understood was a huge priority. As our #1 natural resource, we all talked about how we need to do a better job of getting folks to the beach, making their experience enjoyable, easy to use, functional, safe, secure, etc. The Beach Parking Pass program. That's something that Ms. Dunlop and her group and other folks have mentioned to us. But when you look at the staff makeup versus a year ago to today, everybody involved is new. Mark came in February. I'm new in my role. We have a new facilities manager. We created a beach operations team, have a new beach operations manager. And even Mary Ellen, who was on the front desk talking to citizens, processing applications, she left a few months ago, and we've recently replaced her. So all of the people involved, we look at the beach parking pass application, and there were questions, why do we do it this way? Could it be better? And so I think staff was going to recommend to improve that regardless of citizen input or desires. The residents we've spoken to, Ms. Dunlap and her group primarily, they have done an excellent job putting together succinct ideas and goals. It was not just complaints or saying this is broken, this is wrong. They've done a very good job capturing what they want, what they see as primary users of the park. You know, these are the dysfunctions. These are the issues we see that could be made better, and here's how you can make them better. So we greatly appreciate that, and we're using that as our basis for most of these operational improvements. And so we come to you today to propose some policy recommendations at the end, and I'll touch briefly on the maintenance and capital other improvements we're going to make. The history of the park was built in '99, 135 spaces currently available to beach pass holders. 2010, the meters were installed as part of a DHEC agreement for funds to assist or supplement renourishment project. Over the summer, we've heard input, and town staff has been assessing operational improvements to be made on our own. We came to the Community Services Public Safety Committee in November and to Town Council later in November. And Town Council remanded this back to the Public Planning Committee, basically to vet out and get these policy issues addressed so staff could move forward. Public input, as I mentioned, Ms. Dunlap and her group and others have given us very, very good ideas. There have been some public meetings. I know the town manager has met with citizens. Mark Robson is our point person on this. And going forward, he'll be the one communicating with citizens groups on the schedule, the operations, the changes, et cetera. But Mark Robson, via emails, face-to-face meeting, phone calls, et cetera, he has received a lot of this input as well. And to summarize the goals and the themes of the island residents' input we received, they want this to be a residents-only beach parking area. Remove the meters, of course. Remove from this park. They may need to be relocated at another park, but at least get them removed from islanders and free up more spaces for pass holders. Prohibit access to shuttle bus and drop off traffic. There's a lot of folks, groups coming, dropping people off there, traffic, capacity issues, et cetera. Increase the enforcement for anyone violating policies. There's safety concerns about the large volumes of pedestrian traffic accessing the park. The safety issue is that these people, I've heard numbers of 400 folks a day on foot entering the park, walking down the middle of the drive aisle. As vehicles, cars and trucks want to enter the park and park, there's a conflict there. And so there are no proper infrastructure facilities for the pedestrians. There's no pathway or sidewalk right now. Folks either walk in the drive aisle on the pavement or need to move off to the grass shoulder if a vehicle comes. They've asked us to reinvest in the infrastructure, 20-year-old park, update things, add new amenities, et cetera. The signage and oversight could be better to help manage use of the park and inform people of the rules and where they're to go and what they're to do, et cetera. And then, of course, communication and public outreach is always key, and they would like us to ramp that up, do a better job of that, and specifically with certain groups, timeshare, shuttle buses, et cetera. We looked at benchmarking. Mark Robson and his team contacted 18 other similar communities. I know Walker Master Plan had some things in their report, but Mark and his team contacted 18 other coastal communities in Florida, South Carolina, and Georgia. And what he found was 13 of the 18 did offer a resident beach parking pass program. 5 of those 13 offered the pass for free, didn't charge anything. It was a very simple process to get your pass. 5 of those 13 also allowed timeshares as eligible for beach parking passes as residents. Of the folks who charged a fee, it ranged anywhere from $30 a year to $200 a year. Currently, we're charging $30 for 2 years, so we're at $15 a year at the current Hilton Head rate. They also asked about public beach parking fees, and these ranged anywhere from $1.50 an hour to $5 an hour. And this was for the general public parking areas, not the resident passes. Policy framework. So the pass eligibility is key. What are our terms and conditions for who is eligible for a beach parking pass? That needs to be crystal clear for the public, and it needs to be made as simple as possible for efficient vetting and processing on our end. Removal of the public parking meters. That's, I think everyone's on board with that. It's just a matter of resolving that with DHEC. Prohibiting access to these shuttle buses and drop-off traffic. Staff, we recognize that and think that's a prudent idea. We would want to make sure that we accommodate assisted living facilities with island residents and make sure that those owners, residents groups would be eligible to get a pass, and they could continue to transport residents to Islanders Beach Park. Enhance the education, security enforcement efforts. Consider options for pedestrian and bicycle access. That is the safety issue of too many people on the pavement, pedestrians and vehicles trying to share the same footprint as there are no facilities for pedestrians. Another one, enhancement at other beach parks to accommodate redistribution of beachgoers. If we redirect the shuttle buses, we need to make sure that is clear. If that is to be at Dreesen and Coligny, most likely that the infrastructure, signage, et cetera, are proper to accommodate those new beachgoers. And the public information campaign, as we've said, it will be key to this being successfully implemented. The current process right now, and for the past several years, to prove you qualify for a beach pass, you just need to come in and show a driver's license and a vehicle registration. If that driver's license and registration has a Hilton Head address, we sell you a pass. If the address is not on Hilton Head, then we ask the owners to provide some proof of Hilton Head property ownership. So it could be a tax receipt, lease, utility bill, et cetera. We offer an unlimited number of passes. If you are eligible and you have 10 registered vehicles, you could get 10 passes. The fee for a 2-year pass, $30. The term was set at 2 years. I mean, that was just for ease of operation, and so folks didn't have to do it every year. Here's some stats, current passes. We currently have 8,025 valid active passes. These are the 2021 passes and the 21/22 passes. Here at January 1st, this number will go down to about 4,000. So of the 21/22 passes, there will be about 4,000 in use. I have some other operational numbers that brought in a revenue of $240, let's say for the 2 years. So $120,000 gross revenue annually. We looked in-house at the operating cost, and say here 35,000. So you take that away, the total net annual revenues, 120 minus 35. That's what we're bringing in to use. I know the beach parking master plan will look at that and the funding, whether it is an enterprise fund to be self-sustaining, et cetera. And folks that have a beach pass can park at the metered spaces, and they can go down to Coligny and park and Follyfield and other places as well. We talked about operational or options for improvements. Excuse me, we're talking about proof of Hilton Head residency. I think to make this better, the driver's license, vehicle registration, of course, for the vehicle you're going to put the sticker on, and current proof of Hilton Head residency via a property tax bill. 4% or 6% residents, primary, secondary ownership of property on Hilton Head Island, but not the timeshare ownership if it is less than 6 months. So 152nd ownership, owning 1 week a year, may not be eligible for the new pass. The number of passes, staff was talking about potentially 2 passes per property could be issued. I think the more passes that are issued opens this up for abuse of the program. If someone gets, if they have 6 vehicles registered to their name, they get 6 passes, they may try to, give those passes to other people. We talked about the types of vehicles that we would give passes to. South Carolina DMV has a definition of a commercial motor vehicle. 26,000 pounds or greater, will accommodate 16 or more passengers, or transports hazardous waste. I think all those things are not really what is intended to be allowed in this residence park. And as we mentioned, I think we need to make accommodations somehow to ensure that folks with assisted living needs to enter the park via a shuttle bus can do so under this new eligibility requirement. You know, the fee right now, it's $30 for 2 years. As I mentioned in the benchmarking research, some of the folks, other cities offer this for free. I think this could be contingent on the parking master plan, what we ultimately decide on this. Staff talking about the function and efficiency of operations would like to go to a 1-year pass. And some of the reason behind this, changing the colors, if we come up with a pass and it's placed on the windshield each new year, change the color as many of the PUD and gated communities do, such that as you're entering, security can easily tell, is this a current and valid pass? And then consider the maximum number of passes per property that we want to give out. Key elements of the communication and marketing strategy, as always, the town website. I think that is the most obvious place people would go to if they want to learn information about town rules and procedures and policy. Social media, we'll continue to get that out just to keep the information fresh and from time to time update folks. Print and digital media, as things change, we would definitely want to get news stories out in the traditional media outlets. And then we would continue ongoing updates through news releases, emails, social media, et cetera. But we would make direct contact with those groups who may be impacted, who may have to change the way they do things with these changes in policy, shuttle bus drivers, short-term rentals, timeshare groups, et cetera. The facilities improvements, I've gone over these before. There's a long list of updates we see that would be prudent at the park. As an update to council and those viewing, the Scenic Overlook Pavilion is under contract. We have Nick's Construction under contract, an excellent local, highly reputable firm who built Low Country Celebration Park. So that new pavilion should be open and in business here, I think in April. But the long list of other improvements, adding more spaces is key, the guard station, a sidewalk pathway, that is if pedestrians and folks are still allowed to enter the park. And then signage, drainage, landscaping, lighting, etc. Here is a schedule we put together. Public input and research. We're always open to public input, of course, 365 days a year. Anyone who wants to provide input, please do so. And removing the parking meters. We understand Ms. Dunlap's frustration, and we will continue to press on DHEC to resolve that as soon as we can. The policy framework, that's what we're talking about today, and we will hope that goes to town council and get resolved such that by February, staff can begin enacting any new operational issues under the policy changes. And that would include the decal distribution process. We'll update the application on the website and how we process those. The public information campaign, public information campaign would go forth also as soon as any policy changes are made. And we'd implement all of this for the summer season in May. The capital improvements, let me please inform you that we are surveying the property right now. The park's over 20 years old. It's been kind of piecemeal added onto over the years. So we're doing a fully updated survey. We will look at the new improvements, what we want to maybe reconstruct and finalize a design. There will be public input as we go forward with that. But with the design and permitting and bidding process, it will be post-season in October before we would break ground on any new capital improvements. And the option for motion. This is what I alluded to, Mr. Ames. The menu we have here: removal of the parking meters, contingent on SEDHEC approval per the legal agreement. Eligibility for a beach parking pass. Residential property owners on Hilton Head Island, the 4 and 6%ers both. we had recommended shouldn't apply to timeshare ownership of less than 6 months or 183 days. And to allow the renters or those with a lease agreement long-term of greater than 183 days. The fee for a beach parking pass, that could be lumped in with the master plan, or we could decide we could hold it as is, or make it free. As I said, a lot of communities make it free. And if we're going forward with the master plan, look at recouping any enterprise operational cost under that. Limit shuttle access. We would continue to allow the assisted living facilities, with eligible residents. And then the bicycle and pedestrian access. That's one that if those pedestrians, non-vehicular, non-beach pass holders were allowed access, the way operationally to do that could be through an ID card. If when we sell the passes, part of that was I wish to get a pedestrian pass as well to put in my wallet, you could issue those. I think that's something operationally that we could manage to do if that's how we're directed to go. And moving forward, the next steps would be a town council action and direction based on the committee's recommendations, and then staff would implement those changes and be sure to get out a strong public information campaign to make sure the general public and affected groups are informed. And so I know I hurried through that, but be glad to take questions.
Now go back to that just prior slide with the action items that you're requesting us to take.
Okay. Let's see now. Whoops. Let me.
Second to last slide, I think.
Yes. I think I'm sharing the screen. Yes. There you go. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Would be my suggestion that we limit our discussions to one item at a time, because some of them I think are going to be disposed of fairly quickly and others might have some discussion. So is there a motion to remove the parking meters at Islands Beach contingent on SCDHEC approval?
I'll make that motion, David.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay. Krista, would you call, are there any comments regarding that?
Yes.
Okay.
The agreement with DHEC plainly lays out a 10-year term. It would seem to me that we could take the approach, those 10 years have now expired, give notice to DHEC that in light of the expiration of the agreement according to its terms, we are proceeding accordingly.
I believe the town included that in a letter that it sent to DHEC, but Glenn, I will ask you on a side conversation with Josh to clarify that.
Thank you, I will.
Okay. Are there any other comments on the motion?
Well, that was actually just following up on that. That was actually one of my questions. I know that a letter went out back in mid-December from Mayor on this, and I'm just curious what other attempts prior to that have been made. And then, as Glenn accurately pointed out, there was a short time frame where any of the agreement between the beach renourishment and the parking meters would be in effect. And if we're outside of that, if it's going to take much longer for DHEC to respond to us, are there any real barriers to us just moving forward and getting it done at this point? So I don't know who can.
Josh, do you have a comment that you would like to make here?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So yes, we've reached out to the state. We've made our position fairly clear on this, that it is likely the desire of council to remove the meters and allow for 100% pass holder restricted space. What we are looking for from the state is basically concurrence in our interpretation of the prior signed agreement that it expired at an express date and an express time as stated in that document. And as such, that there's no ongoing obligation that we have to satisfy. That's the response that we have not received yet. And so we continue to pursue that. I think as mentioned just a little bit ago, we recently sent correspondence from the mayor to the director of DHEC to try and move along getting an answer to that question. And so that's what we will continue to pursue. But in terms of whether or not we can do it, I absolutely think we legally can do it, assuming that DHEC is not going to hold us to some kind of ongoing obligation.
So when did we start asking? How long of time have we been waiting for DHEC to respond?
Well, I will tell you, it's not that we haven't heard from them. We have heard from them. Initially, it was, this is such a dated item that they had to go to the archives and pull files from archives. And then there was time that it took to review the file. Most recently, in talking with their staff member, he had an active trial calendar in Charleston. And obviously, when the court reaches out to an attorney, that does take precedence a lot of time. And so he had indicated that we would likely get something back in early December. But again, here we are, and we have not received a response. And therefore, we moved forward with sending out that formal letter. But in terms of the total time that we've been discussing this.
That's okay. That's actually more, that's the detail that I was looking for.
Okay.
Thank you. Don't have to go any further. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Josh, at some point, let me rephrase that. The staff might consider whether or not an encouragement from our delegation, just to clarify the timing. So,
and David, to that point, we made sure to copy Senator Davis on that letter, and he has received a copy of it.
all right, thank you very much. If there are no other comments, Krista, will you call the roll on this motion?
Yes, sir. Excuse me. Mr. Brown,
Support.
Mrs. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Stanford,
Yes,
Mr. Ames.
Yes, thank you. The next item is the eligibility for a beach parking pass. Is there a motion to recommend what the staff has put forward?
I would move that the staff develop a program that permits residents only to use the facilities at Islanders Beach Park. Those residents must prove their residency with appropriate legal document, including a South Carolina driver's license, and that driver's license showing residency on Hilton Head Island.
Staff is also recommending that 4% and 6% property owners, but only timeshares over 183 days and rental lease agreements of over 183 days. Are you comfortable with those items as well?
I will include those in the motion, yes.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion. I have.
Okay. Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second. Go ahead, Tammy.
So my concern with this is the driver's license piece. So when you look at 4% versus 6%, many of the 6% property owners who do not rent their property, and I think that's another element of this. So a 6% property owner who would be eligible for a beach parking pass, two things. One, they often will not have a South Carolina driver's license because their primary residence is elsewhere. So that's a hurdle that I think we have to be really, really careful of.
Mm-hmm.
The other is 6% property owners who can show their, they have to be distinguished, my mind anyway, distinguished between those who use their property exclusively within their family friend group, and those who rent their property. And so I think there's probably some alignment with our short-term rental licensure there that would be necessary to distinguish those two. But I'm mostly concerned, so that's something that needs to be teased out. I don't want to see happen is 6% property owners who use their properties exclusively for their own use, and their families, obviously, not be eligible for parking pass because their driver's license is not South Carolina. Does that make sense? Did I
Yes,
lay that? Okay, all right.
I understand the point, but to me, are we talking about people that are residents? Or are we talking about people that are property owners? We refer to this as residents, and the residents are in fact those that would have a South Carolina license. We can expand it beyond that if that's our intention.
Okay, Alex?
Yes, thank you. I guess the first point of clarity, I want to make sure this slide is not including the driver's license, but I know that's part of Councilman Stanford's motion. But I want to pick up where we are on the property tax. I don't know, proof or difference, whatever you want to call it. You do find individuals that may spend half of the year somewhere else and then half of the year on Hilton Head, and they may not have Hilton Head's home as their primary residence. They would fall in that 6%. So I agree that portion, in my mind, if they're here half of the year, then they're more than a resident here. They are contributing. But I'm also curious as to how deep of dive that staff can make on a property tax bill. Commonly, properties may be of multiple ownership. Okay, and typically there's a mailing address and a name associated with it on a tax bill, and then from there, in the legal description of ownership, there's not enough room to fit multiple owners, so typically it's in alphabetical order. I've got grave concerns there because in the instance of heirs property, there may be individuals living on Hilton Head with a local driver's license and living on the property, and their name shows up nowhere on the property tax bill. Okay, and it is more becoming more and more common now that as you clear title of heirs property, that you formulate a LLC, just so that the percentages of ownership is clearly defined. And that too, if there's a family compound that's in a LLC, we will start to see some issues there with, I guess, proving ownership if we're relying on the tax bill solely. So those are my questions and concerns wrapped around this. I think we need to, I'm in support of it, of course. I just need more information as to how we get to the end result.
Thank you, Alex. I did not anticipate Glenn's motion having a license stipulation, and he asked the question: is it a definition of resident as a person who lives here, or is it a tax contributor? And where I came out on that, it's 4% and 6%. Those people are paying taxes. They should have an equal opportunity to get a pass. Um, I think Alex brings up a good point, and I wonder whether or not there is some further qualification that would clarify what he's trying to do, and that might be a utility bill or some other kind of local address confirmation. So, Glenn, I think that the license is creating a problem in my mind, for my support, because of the person who has a second home here, lives in Charlotte, Atlanta, wherever, comes down here periodically, uses the residence for his family, her family. And very clearly, to me, they should be allowed to have a pass. Where it gets a little murky is where Tammy was going, and that is, okay, what about the guy who is paying 6% property tax, but comes to the island maybe 2 weeks a year, is basically renting his property? My reaction to that is that person probably isn't going to buy a parking pass. He's going to be renting his property through the high season. And so I think that's a de minimis issue. And if we keep it simple, where it's 4%, 6% timeshare over 183 days, rental lease agreements over 183 days, and we deal with Alex's question about, okay, how do you not adjudicate, but how do you resolve the issue when it's a complicated LLC or something else? And that brings up the other point, where there is clearly just a business ownership, who gets the benefit? And I would have to say one person on one car, but that would be my thought. So where do I come out on this? I think we have to instruct staff to move forward and come back to us in January with their recommendation of implementing a beach parking pass that serves the broader purpose of Islanders Beach Park, but it isn't necessarily the final solution. And then secondly, by our taking action today, we are going to get comments from the public saying, well, what about me? And we're going to have to address those. And so I see today's decision as being more than a straw man, but I think we need to take a position and move it forward in the public domain.
So
Can
can I jump
Go
in?
ahead.
Yeah, you were about to ask. Sorry for getting ahead of you. So I came with my question with a possible solution that I'd like to offer, and the 6%, those who, that it be cross-referenced. Now that we have a situation where all short-term rentals, regardless if it's one or multiple, have to be registered and licensed by the town, then there should be an easy way, sorry about that, hopefully it's easy, an easy way to cross-reference those who have a business license with those who don't. And if you have a business license for your 6% property, you're not eligible for a parking pass. And so to me, it seems like that might solve that problem. The concern with just leaving it open to anyone who has a 6% property tax bill is, while it might be that the folks who rent short time aren't sending their renters to Islanders Beach or Islanders Park, they also very well may be. And it defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do here in retaining the space for residents of the island. So if we can distinguish those through the business license department, I think that will help with that and won't cause, and it'll continue the efforts that we're making to really protect this. The other part of it, it's reacting to the LLC part that I hadn't contemplated until now, is that there are many, and I don't know how many, but there are many of the short-term rentals that aren't owned by individual property owners, but they are owned by corporations and who have LLCs, and you don't have one name, just I guess in the same vein, although it's different, but in the same vein as the heirs property might be. Obviously, they're to be considered differently, but we need to have something thought through with regard to those short-term rental ownerships who might find some way to skirt through a loophole here and defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do. So I'm happy to move it forward, but these are answers before it's finally implemented that need to be resolved. I've heard from a number of people, it's not because I thought of it, I've heard from a number of people across the island who are 6% owners, don't have driver's license, South Carolina driver's license, do not rent their houses, and do not want to be excluded from being a resident and able to use it. So that's what I want to see done.
I think you make a good point. And if staff is able to cross-reference the business license to rental properties or to 6%ers, that may be a direction to go. And I would be willing to support that moving forward, just to get something on the table. And my question to Alex and Glenn, what is your reaction to that?
Alex, you go first.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
Again, my concern here is, are we defining residents or are we defining property owners? And the concern is abuse of this by non-residents. And maybe that could be met with an affidavit that's signed at the time that you seek the permit that says you reside here for 183 days per year or more, or alternatively, that you do not rent your property, your 6% property. I think, David, we have created a number of issues here, and I would like to hear from staff a report back on what they think is most practical for us to have moving forward.
Well, Glenn, I would like to move this forward with our conditions for explanation. In other words, pending their response on these different matters. This is a critical item, and I think it's time that we move it forward. So if you're willing to remove the license issue and we go with what staff has recommended, but acknowledging that we have brought up salient points that need to be understood in the final wording, I'd like to move it forward.
I'm willing to do that, David, but that is with the condition that I may indeed, at the time of final approval, take a different position, because I think we're here to protect the interest of residents. But I'll move forward with this as you've stated.
Okay, and the motion can be amended as I stated?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be deleting reference to a South Carolina driver's license.
Yes.
That was all, yes.
Okay. Krista, would you call the roll on the motion, please?
Certainly, sir. And again, just to clarify, this is the motion as amended, removing the driver's license.
Yes.
Correct? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Mr. Brown,
Support.
Mrs. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Stanford,
Yes.
and Mr. Ames.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
The next is the fee for a beach parking pass, free or at cost derived from the beach parking master plan. I'll just introduce, the way I'm looking at this is that we are making decisions today that may in the future be modified by an overall beach parking master plan. My thought here is that if this group, the Public Planning Committee, feels a fee is appropriate, then I think it should be a 1-year fee and we move forward. And from my personal standpoint, it seems to me that the community is used to paying for beach parking pass. We don't have the answers to whether or not we're going to have an overall parking fee for the island or a disparate one, a differential one. So my thought is to keep this as simple as possible and adopt a 1-year, perhaps $30 parking fee. But I'm open to your thoughts at this time. Tammy?
So if the two items, Islanders, the beach parking passes and beach parking fees are aligned and moving down the same track at the same time, and we discover that there's going to be, and again, you can identify, someone mentioned this as a revenue source, which I don't really see it that way. Obviously, there will be revenue generated, just as we were just informed. The simple beach parking pass has generated a revenue over the years. I wouldn't want there to be something of a double dip type thing, or if there is an advantage that was to come from an overall beach parking fee throughout the island that we implement, that's that other track, then I would look for those additional funds being generated to offset our residents' contributions for their beach parking pass. So 1 year, it probably makes sense, since we're not sure how it's going to flesh out, though I hope that we get a lot done in the next few months. I wouldn't say $30 for 1 year, because folks were paying $30 for 2 years. So that's really all I have to say about that.
Okay, Glenn?
I agree that an annual pass makes more sense because of the changes that go on in ownership and so forth. And so I support the idea of a 1-year pass. I don't really have an opinion on what that fee should be. There is a cost to the town in staff time, in paperwork, in printing the stickers or whatever's going to be going on there. So I think there should be a fee, but $15 or so seems to me to work.
Okay, Alex?
Yes. So just so I'm clear, Mr. Chair, we don't have a motion on the table for this particular item. We're just discussing it, correct?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. I made a statement before I asked for the motion. Thank you for correcting me, but you go ahead and then we'll have a motion.
Okay, it's fair enough. I guess where I come out on this, there's definitely, I guess, some timing concerns here with the master plan moving along at the same time as this particular action. I've got a different perspective on it as far as having a fee or having it being implemented for a 1-year term. And I'm just going back to the numbers that staff shared with us. I think we were netting somewhere around $80,000 at the end of the day, with I think it was maybe 8,000 or 4,000, maybe 4,000 passes per year. And it's about $35,000 worth of staff time and effort. With all that we have going on, I'm not necessarily in favor of having a fee for the beach parking pass. And we're having enough trouble trying to figure out how you're eligible for the pass. And if we're only touching 10% of our population with that, it just seems like a lot of work. And not a great yield as far as income is concerned. And quite frankly, for the taxes that we're currently paying, Hilton Head, I'm not necessarily in favor of having to have a pass to access the beach. So that's my take on it, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So Alex has said perhaps no fee. Glenn and Tammy said fee. I'm going to say fee because we basically have a system set up, a bureaucracy set up to deal with a fee. We don't have a bureaucracy set up for no fee. And I just want to avoid what that might look like come April. And so I think from a practical standpoint, it probably makes sense to have a fee for 1 year. And if it's $15, if it's $20, the money isn't as important to me as how we get through this next year with a minimal amount of bureaucratic disruption. So is there a motion to adopt a 1 year fee of $15?
I would so move that we recommend to staff development of a plan based upon a fee on an annual basis of $15 per year for parking passes for residents.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Are there any comments about that?
I just want to make a clarification so that I just want to make a clarification because I heard it stated differently, and I'm sure it was just the way the parking fee isn't for access to the beach. The parking fee is for access to a parking spot. Our beaches are free, but this parking is what we're talking about, not paying for access to our beach.
You're absolutely correct.
I just wanted to make that really clear. Thank you.
Yeah. And Glenn, your motion implied that we are making a permanent decision, whereas I think it might be prudent for us to be making a 1 year decision until such time that the overall beach parking master plan is set.
I don't have any problem with that, but I would comment that we can always change something in the future that we've adopted
Okay,
now.
we'll just keep it. We'll just keep it simple.
Sunset on something, and then we don't keep an eye on it, and it goes away.
Fine. Let's move ahead. Krista, would you call the roll on this motion, please?
Yes,
David, I
sir.
have one other comment, if I could, please.
Yes.
Quickly, I'll say, we need to be prepared for the transition from people that have purchased passes under the current program, moving into the next program, and we need to ask staff to develop that transition plan. Thank you.
We rely on our capable staff to work through that.
Absolutely.
Krista, please call the roll.
Certainly. Mr. Brown,
Opposed?
Mrs. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Stanford,
Yes.
Mr. Ames.
Yes. The next item on the list is limit shuttle access to Islanders Beach Park and allow assisted living with eligible residents. That should be 4 eligible residents. I'm not sure. Jeff, can you just clarify that to only assisted living facilities with eligible? Okay, that's okay. I just misread it. Okay. Is there a motion on that one? That should go pretty quickly, shouldn't it?
I would move that we approve, that we limit shuttle access to Islanders Beach Park to buses and similar vehicles, but permit buses that are transporting residents of retirement homes and similar communities residing on the island.
Is it, well, let me just qualify that. The bus term concerns me. Is there a problem with you not using shuttle? Because a shuttle would include any number of you.
What happens is these residents are sometimes taken to Islanders Beach Park in a bus. And I think
Okay.
those buses should be permitted. I know that specifically has happened.
Yeah, okay. There's got to be a term for a vehicle that has a number of persons in it that is used for shuttling.
You say so.
Jeff, is there a term that you can suggest?
Well, shuttle vehicle is what we had thought. You know, it could be a station wagon, a van, a bus, etc.
So it is it's the operation of shuttling people that you're emphasizing there. I like that.
That's fine. I'll amend accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion on this item.
Yeah.
Hearing none. Krista, will you call the roll? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I guess I'm a little confused on this one. So we're looking to limit shuttle access to this particular beach park to only those that are living in assisted facilities.
Correct.
So if there's a shuttle service that is moving qualified residents outside of assisted living to Islanders Beach, it would not be permitted.
That's what it says, yes.
Can you give us an example of your concern, Alex?
Well, yeah, I guess,
Church vehicles?
yeah, I mean, if a church decides to take a group down to the beach in their vehicle, that would be one. I know that there's I guess a breeze stop close to Islanders Beach there, not necessarily right at the drop off, but you know, if there were any other, I guess, transportation services that were moving residents from one part of the island to another, they would not be permitted either. And you know, I'm just curious to what it is that we're really trying to accomplish here. We're not excluding some individuals or residents to that degree that would normally have, you know, the same criteria as far as having access to the park.
Josh, would it be possible for us to include in an ordinance some statement that says, or as approved by staff or town manager or somebody else? I mean, I understand what Alex is saying, and we can't cover everything in 2-word shuttle vehicle. Is there any latitude for us to move this forward, but acknowledge that there may be a local church that periodically takes its parishioners and / residents to the beach?
Mr. Chairman, I think the simple answer to your question is yes. I mean, ultimately, if the committee and council can give staff the policy direction that what you are intending to do is to limit the ability to have drop-offs in this area to residents only, then it's a question of what do we need to put in place to accomplish that objective. And based upon our prior history, we knew that there were, you know, assisted living facilities and the like that had previously accessed this, which is why you see that identified here. If there are other entities such as churches or things that truly are transporting just local residents, then we would want to achieve that same intent as well.
Well, it gets a little complicated because I've seen shuttles from Georgia at Celebration Park bringing parishioners to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't just say churches. And that's why
No.
I was thinking if you could make it by special exception, maybe we can move forward.
Absolutely. And I think it also is important that some of the assisted living facilities we know do this on a continual and recurring basis. Others, it may just be a one-off. And again, if they reach out to us, I think as staff, we can probably attend to those on a case-by-case basis. But the bottom line is we want to carry out the intent of council, which I believe in hearing from you is to try to limit that access to being residents only to the extent that we can.
I don't have a
And-
problem calling out assisted living facilities, but opening up the possibility that we haven't included bona fide other vehicles. So that would be my thought there. Other
And
thoughts?
I would
Yeah.
just jump in and say that Islanders Park is not the only access, beach access on the island. And so in light of trying to make this work with the fewest or no loopholes, that defeats the purpose of all of the effort and the intention of the council, driven by the desires of the Hilton Head Island residents. I would just leave it as it is and allow other shuttles to utilize one of our other very many fine beach access points. And not trying to say some are, and not trying to say that, yeah, and that I'm just leave that as my simple
Yeah,
statement.
I think that's got some vulnerability in my opinion. But Glenn, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I understand what Tammy is suggesting, but I think Alex makes a good point. We have, for example, a church group that wants to go to the Islanders Beach Park, and that church group is residents here. They should have the same privilege as someone that's in an assisted living. And I think, David, your suggestion that on a case-by-case basis, people could seek that permission and get that permit and be able to park at Islanders Beach Park.
Okay, would you make the amendment to your motion then, please?
Can I just throw out a scenario of a camp a church camp with wanting to use the beach? Would they then for the season seek out, I'm just
No,
hashing it a little bit out now. Would they seek out a pass for the season for their campers? Is it a church located on, and I'm using church because that's what was brought up as an example. So sticking with the same example, that is located on the house with a residency on the island. I don't know how that distinguishing, those distinguishing pieces will allow for, and maybe it's further discussion needed for staff to make that decision on a case-to-case basis, but there,
yeah.
I don't have.
I would rely on staff to come back to us and do their best effort to solve those potential difficulties.
So I would amend my motion, Mr. Chairman, to add that we would allow this type of vehicle that is occupied by other island residents, for example, church groups and so forth, as determined from time to time by town staff.
All right, is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
All right, thank you. If there are no further comments, Krista, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Brown,
Approve.
Mrs. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Stanford,
Yes.
Mr. Ames.
Yes, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Jeff, my screen is, can you move that up a little bit? I see pedestrian bicycle access to Islanders Beach Park require a special identification pass or not, and that's all I can read.
That's the extent of it, Chairman Ames.
Oh, all right,
The
okay.
issue, yeah, the issue there was folks had recognized pedestrians and others using the paved drive aisle access. And so there's a conflict with vehicles, and there needs to be something done to make that more safe, either limiting the pedestrian and bicycle access or providing proper infrastructure.
Okay, is there a motion on this item?
So pedestrian bicycle access to Islanders Beach Park requires special identification pass or not? So is that what the question is?
Yes.
Did I miss something?
No, the question is, do we want to limit bicycle or pedestrian access, presumably by anybody? Or if there's a special identification for residents, they get in. So it's two parts.
Yeah, I thought, okay, thank you for separating it out for me.
And Mr. Chairman, I know you're in the process of soliciting a motion, and I think you should kind of continue to solicit the opinions of the committee on this matter. However, I do think it would probably be a good idea that for any item coming out of committee on this particular matter, that we seek some advice from the town attorney. I know that when it comes to accessing public property, there can be some fairly stringent limitations from a constitutional standpoint. When you look at areas like town hall, public libraries and such. And so when you consider that the beach is a public property owned by the state, I think that if we are going to put something in place along these lines, we probably need to get some advice and guidance that it can be legally defensible.
So the motion should be pending legal advice.
That would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I want, can Mr. Gruber clarify that? Are you speaking on the motions that are germane to access, or this particular one, pedestrian and bicycle?
Just this particular one, pedestrian and bicycle. I would say the other ones already have a fairly clear and established history with the town.
As far as vehicular access?
That is correct. We've regulated and limited vehicular access to that property for some time. We're just choosing to go about it in a slightly different manner.
Fair enough.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve a policy or recommend a policy to town council, I suppose, that limits pedestrian and bicycle access to Islanders Beach Park to those that have town issued cards establishing their residence and qualification for that access.
Pending legal advice.
Pending legal advice. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Is there a second on that?
I'll second it.
All right. Discussion. Alex, anything to add?
I'm curious at this point to hear what the legal minds have to say, so I'll pause.
Okay. All right. Glenn, you made the motion. Any comments?
No, I think that we need to hear legal advice on this. And then assuming that we have that legal advice, this would be carrying out at least my intent about the use of Islanders Beach Park.
Yeah, I think the motion is that getting a green light from legal advice where we want this to be adopted. That's the way I'm reading it.
I think that's what I said. Yes.
Okay.
And yeah, can I just make some clarification points that,
Sure.
So I guess pending legal advice, though I don't see this that different than limiting access to a beach behind a gate that isn't accessible. So I don't see it that different, but I'll be interested in learning from those who know far more than I do. But I want to talk about a pass, assuming that's what we're able to confirm we can do. The pass being tied to the same rules as what we have established for vehicle passes that's what we're saying, right? When we say this, okay.
Yes.
I would assume so.
Okay, and then I would ask the next question that we haven't discussed even when it was about vehicles is if you're looking at a pedestrian pass, and let's say someone who lives nearby in Folly Field has a family of 5 and they take their wagon and they scoot down to Islanders Park for the afternoon for do they get 5 passes? So that's just a question. It's not, it doesn't need an answer right now, but all of these little things to me need to really be teased out and thought of. So we really fulfill the intent. That's all.
Tammy, on your point about a beach behind a gate, you have to go through private property to get to that beach, whereas this is public property. I think that's the distinction, but I understand why you mentioned it.
Yeah.
Okay, Glenn? Did you say something?
No, I didn't. I'm fighting a landscaper here. Sorry.
All right. Okay, Krista, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Brown,
Support.
Mrs. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Stanford,
Yes.
and Mr. Ames.
Yes, passes unanimously. Jeff, do you have any closing comments or questions for the committee?
No, sir. Thank you very much, and staff has all that we need to move forward and report back.
Well, good job again. Thank you very much. All right,
Thank
let's
you.
go on. Let's go on to the next item, which is a discussion about e-bikes. Diane?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Ames, committee members. I'd like to offer a presentation on e-bikes, and if it pleases the committee, move through quickly as well, because this material has we've gone over before.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. We're not going to take significant action today, so just to get some comments from the committee. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Are y'all able to see my
Yes.
screen?
Mhm.
All right, thank you. The presentation is going to include defining what the issues are regarding e-bikes, the process that we went through to engage stakeholders, the feedback we received from them, South Carolina law in this regard, and our recommendations, and then the action that we're asking the committee to take. This all began when we were contacted by residents who were concerned about the proliferation of e-bikes on public pathways. Back in August, we met with your committee and we discussed both the state, federal actions that have been taken with regard to electric bikes, and in particular, the state action that changed the definition of electric bikes, moving them out of a definition of a motorized vehicle into what in essence I would say is to equate them with a bicycle. At that time, there were a number of— Can you click on the slideshow? Oh, I'm sorry. Click on the slideshow. It's not moving through?
Start from the beginning.
I apologize.
No apologies necessary.
So I'm not sure if where I am is where y'all are.
Introduction, defining the issues is what's up.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now I've lost my train of think. All right, so we at the direction of the committee, we engaged in a pretty comprehensive path meeting with many different stakeholders and flushed this out a number of different ways. And as a result of that, we came up with sort of what the issues are, what the concerns were from those groups. The groups included Bike Walk Hilton Head, bike rental or sales business owners, community and POA managers, other folks who were just interested in the public, and then community leaders. And I should say that the Bike Walk Hilton Head and the business community were tremendous help to me as I pulled all this information together, and from areas that I didn't think about, things that they're aware of that I don't think anybody thought about because just not being on the ground. We looked at what was going on in other communities and then what was going on at the federal level. We then sort of moved into the more practicable considerations, which starts with why are these popular? Why did they come here? Why are they popular? And there's a number of different reasons. This is based on stakeholder feedback and the public, that a number of different reasons, that they're convenient for people that maybe want to ride with their families but can't keep up, that they are able to ride longer distances, that a benefit apparently from them, and it makes sense, is that once people start to ride in a way that they're assisted, they become more interested in riding for exercise. Back to the families, keeping up with the youngins. They are looking to the long term. Once the corridor, the Bridge Gateway Corridor project is a reality, then the notion of perhaps being able to commute to the island from Bluffton or from Bluffton to here, whether it's for work or socializing, shopping, just sightseeing is pretty strong, at least in my opinion, and I think from the public. The prices are decreasing. You could click right now and order one from Amazon, be delivered to your home. And I think that the bottom line of it is that these devices are here and they're not going anywhere. Whether what we choose to do with them is something different. Some of the problems, which of course this is the genesis of how this came to us, that our pathways were never designed to accommodate, well, not only these bikes, but just the volume of traffic that we've got, that the roadways are not safe, other than maybe Pope Avenue or the other places that have speed limits that are 35 miles an hour or less, that it's not safe for anything other than a car really to be out on the road. Some of these bikes, particularly the class 3, travel up to 28 miles an hour, which is a bit scary. Some of the pathways, as Ms. Bryson showed in her photos, we've got root intrusion, debris, a number of different things that make it risky for any kind of fast riding bike, or I think even for bikes in general. And then, of course, always young adults may ride just because they're free and they can fast, and that's a concern. They're more complicated than a regular bike, there's no question. And when you talk about rentals, often these are folks who, this is the first time they've gotten their hands on one. They're heavier because of the batteries, and they have to be, just the frames are stronger so that they're heavier, and makes it a bit more dangerous. We've got to have some rules about how they're used. Should the committee decide to move this forward. Bike etiquette is nearly non-existent during the summer in particular. And this applies for bikes, e-bikes, and anything, people that are just not cognizant that they've got to alert folks around them to what they're doing and be paying attention to what the other people are doing as well. Some visitors is a different component, because they may come here with the notion that they know what the rules are, and they don't. They may be taking it from their home state or community, or that they're here on vacation, so woohoo, no rules, just do whatever you want to. Speed, at the end of the day, kept coming up over and over and over and over again, that it's a primary component of the danger of the risk with these devices. South Carolina, the legislature in early 2019 changed the statute to, in essence, equate electric assist bicycles with regular bicycles, and then they defined them. South Carolina also limited them to the ones that are 28 miles an hour, which would fall into the category of what is defined and federally defined as Class 1 or Class 2 bikes. So right now, the Class 3 bikes are not included in this state definition of a non-motorized vehicle. The recommendations that staff is proposing takes it a little farther than what the state has done, and that is just to go ahead and adopt the federal classifications and include all three, just for more definition purposes rather than anything else, and for consistency from the federal level. So the Class 1 and Class 2 are basically the same in terms of power. The difference is in an operational sense. In order to get a Class 1 bicycle rolling, you have to pedal. With a Class 2, you don't. You use something that's sort of like a throttle. And then the Class 3, these are the ones that are capable of getting up to 28 miles an hour. And they are not, under state law, they're not included in that definition. So we really don't have to worry about them. It just seemed that if we could define them all to indicate we're aware they're there, but they're not part of the town code and what's permissible. I know I'm moving through. Any questions?
I don't hear any. Go ahead.
All right. Yes, sir. All three classes are able to have speedometers, and most of them do, which makes sense if we're going to govern by speed, if that's what the committee decides. On to the further recommendations is that would be a big focus on educating, which would come from the bike rental agencies, in that when they're renting their bikes, that there would be some sort of a proposed amount of education and key points, that in order to rent a bike, that you wouldn't just walk up and say, sure, I know how to work it and move off, but that you're required, and that those shops are required to provide to their customers. That the bike ambassadors would help with messaging, although they seem to be pretty busy. So whether or not that flushes out, I'm not sure. That speed limits are established. This is probably the most important thing, other than enforcement, is that we recognize that one way or another that these bikes should not be traveling at speeds. That's something perhaps to be discussed later. If I had to land on a number, I would say 12 miles an hour. Certainly no more than 15, although they can get up to 20, but it's just, and maybe for certain roads, but in the congested areas, it's just too fast to go certainly past 15. There would be arguably governors on the bikes to restrict what they could do, and then consider how they should be treated on the beach. Because these are considered as bicycles, the beach is fair game for them. Enforcement, back to the education, that we would be looking for some kind of strong push to communicate to the riders what the speed limits are. Signage, pathway enforcement, asking for communication from the public through See Click Fix, those kinds of things. in essence, it kind of ties back to the notion of the etiquette and the courtesy that if there could be a way for people to really understand and to respect how you're to drive and operate and behave on the pathways with these bikes or any other bike, that hopefully when the volume increases during the high season, that there'd already be a manner of behaving that would trickle down to as the new folks came out. What we're asking is that the committee recognize that the state law applies here, that the state law does say that e-bikes are the same as regular bikes, and to recognize that they're here, they're not going anywhere, and that they should be, we've got to regulate them and deal with them, and that part of that is that allowing them on the pathways. We'd like direction to pursue some changes to the code to accomplish what we've discussed earlier, to mandate safety education, usage regulations as part of all bicycle rental activities within the limits of the town, that speed limits be established, that governors be required so as to not exceed the maximum posted speed limits. If the committee decides to move this up to town council, that we would be looking for direction on how to coordinate a means to get the message out with everything. What's the speed, the other regulations with the bike shops and so forth, that the etiquette portion of it all, just how you're supposed to operate any bike, and in particular these more dangerous and fast bikes on the pathways. And that is it.
Thank you. Would you keep that last slide up so we can refer to it, please? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Glenn, your thoughts?
Diane, thank you for a thorough and thoughtful report. I am still not quite comfortable that in fact we are forced to treat e-bikes as bicycles so that we can keep normal pedaling bicycles on the paths. That gets down to the definition of e-bike. Can you take us through that briefly, I hope?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I will go back to let me see if this is the right section.
Diane, based on what I've heard, and I may not be accurate here, it's not only this section and another section, and maybe even a third section need to be considered together to get what I would call a clear picture of what the statute actually says.
You are correct. I did not include that in the presentation, but I've got it. I apologize.
David, we may not need that today. We could just leave that as a question to be resolved as you think is appropriate.
I think it is. We've had the same question 3 or 4 times discussing this, and it always continues to pop up. I don't know how we put it to bed, but I'd like to be able to put it to bed. Josh, what are your thoughts?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We actually sought a formal opinion from Curtis as the town attorney on this matter. We've got a correspondence back from him that outlines that statutory language and then concludes with his opinion that based upon the actions by the state, we are preempted in terms of how we treat certain classes of electric bicycles.
I'm
Thank you.
comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Glenn. Any other comments about this?
We haven't talked, when you talk about enforcement, we haven't talked about assessment of fines or drunk driving or these types of things that can occur with this. And so is that part of what you are looking for from us?
Diane?
Yes, sir. Well, on the drunk driving, no, sir, because that would be covered by state law. So if somebody were on one of these devices because it's motorized, actually, I don't know the answer to that. I'm thinking it's not going to fall into our purview.
All right, let's just put a flag in the conversation that that's another item that needs to be thought of. And the way I would look at it, Glenn, is that there is a direction that we're adopting today that says enforcement is going to be an important part of this. Staff, come back to us with language that peels back exactly what enforcement means and how we're going to do it.
I think
Is that?
makes good sense, yes. My final
Okay.
comment is, Diane, your slide that shows speeds is allowing speeds up to 36 miles an hour. I know that wasn't your intention, but let's see if we can find a better slide that talks about 20 miles an hour. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Becker?
So, wait, am I on? Oh, good, I'm not
Yep.
on mute. So a couple of things. I tend to agree that e-bikes are apparently here to stay. I think that all the fantastic, well-conceived ideas of working through the bike rental companies and the education, that whole bundle is necessary, not only with e-bikes, but with bicycles. And so check, great idea. That doesn't address those folks who, as e-bikes have now become so popular, are bringing their bikes on the back of their vehicles coming onto the island. And there's none of that will take place there. We have to rely on people doing their best jobs at being good people. So there's that. Our bike paths were never designed for the amount of people who are walking, much less e-bikes moving at the rate of speed that these will be moving. There's nothing that's going to change that. And so we have a dangerous situation we'd like to avoid. Adding to, in terms of being able to avoid situations like that, we really do have to have some way in which we can enforce number of things. So we let people know what our speed limits are on our pedestrian bike paths with our children, dogs, and people with tricycles, both adults and children. That seems to be completely incongruent to me, how you make that happen. And so the idea of putting more signs, and as everyone well knows, I don't like the signage, abundance of signage that we currently have. The site pollution is overwhelming, and adding to it with blinking or any additional is just something that I oppose. So there's that with regard to our bike paths. We don't talk, I think there was just now in this presentation, and by the way, thank you, Diane, for a great presentation. I truly appreciate you pulling all of this together, but we have yet to talk about the beach. And if one is to think about how our beaches are now very populated, perhaps over capacity, and the number of paraphernalia, tents and the rest that use up the space, and the idea of these very fast moving e-bikes, and we've not really addressed that aspect of it, which I have to say, frankly, is equally, if not more important, that we do so. I'm not sure where we are really creating a system that's going to function, because then we have to also enforce it on the level that who's monitoring it. We can't control the speed on 278. And so who's gonna, and we have the wonderful Sheriff's Department doing that for us, and that's a big job. So how do we do this on the pathways? How do we hand out tickets? In my mind, while it's all very well intentioned, we have to make some adjustments. We have to address how it's going to function on our beaches, because people are going to get hurt there, people are going, and I'll just leave it at that. We are over-regulating ourselves to death with things that we can't control. And so for that reason, at this point, I'm not interested in moving it forward until someone can tell me how all these really great answers are going to solve the problem of how do we truly control it and keep people safe and accommodate those who need this type of transportation to get them around the island, bring them back out into exercise and enjoyment of our beautiful space here. So I'm not sure if all that made sense to anyone. I'm happy to discuss it further, but these answers are great, but I don't think we've solved the problem.
Thank you, Tammy. Alex?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Bush, for your presentation. I too feel as if the enforcement piece is going to be the most challenging, and how we deal with that is still very unknown. And the fact that it is unknown that our pathways become more and more readily used by different type of activities and means of folks moving around. Some type of program that will help with the safety enforcement, I think, needs to be more heavily incorporated into our discussion. And then I'll go a step further. This is not for Ms. Bush, but for someone on staff to take a note of as we start to develop budgeting and capital improvements, where we always have money dedicated to pathways. We need to be consistent with our pathways if we're talking about safety. And I think safety trumps all. It doesn't matter if it's an e-bike or if it's someone just pushing a stroller. Too often we have line of sight issues. Too often we have routes. Too often the width of the pathways is not the same. The edges erode when folks are passing one another. It's a dangerous situation. All of those things that are not a part of the e-bike discussion are a part of our safety discussion. So I would hope that when we are being brought forth our budget in next fiscal, we will definitely be taking a closer look at that. Those are my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I'm uncomfortable because there are so many items here that I think are still up in the air. But I think you have to accept the premise that e-bikes are here to stay, and the state law says that they have to be treated like bikes. So then the next question becomes, how do we get the purveyors of the bikes and e-bikes to be our partners? And I'm thinking that this presentation, or at least this last page, should be made available to them. And we should invite their written responses, because I would anticipate that they will probably look at education as something that they're already doing, but that it's very hard to do when you have 50 people lined up all wanting the bikes at the same time. So I'm not sure that we can rely on safety education as being a solution, but just an element of the program. I think the maximum speed issue makes sense. And I do think that there are different areas of the island for different speeds. I think that there's a statement right in this top paragraph that says are here to stay and should therefore be allowed on town's pathways. If state law says that they have to be treated the same way, I think should be must. But I understand why in that particular sentence it says should. I wonder if an avenue that we ought to be pursuing is the business license to rent bikes, that there is language in there that makes it more important for this partnership to work. And when I say partnership to work, I think we can put laws in place, but unless the bike shops are serious about helping us, we're going to have a challenge. And so I think the business license avenue, just like the short-term rental or other areas, may need to be looked at. But in the end, I think island enforcement on a hospitable island should go in the direction of an island ambassadors program. And I just think that that is a serious and big commitment for this island. It's not a police force, but I think we need people helping people to get around and to do things that are safe on this island. So I think the island-wide ambassador program goes in the direction of enforcement that I think is important. The second big picture item that I'm looking at is that we're not going to solve the capacity issue on our bike paths. There are just too many different kinds of vehicles that are using those now. And I think we have to take a look at our whole movement system on the island. How do our roadways really operate? Because at some point, we have to lower our speeds and accommodate more people on the asphalt that are currently our roadways. So in summary, Diane, I think what I would recommend, and I'll get feedback from the other members of Public Planning Committee, is that we make this last sheet available, or actually the entire presentation available to the different bike shops, and ask for written comments back to the Public Planning Committee or you, so that we can look at this next month from their vantage point. I know you've done that up to this point, but we have placed, in my opinion, too much emphasis on education and enforcement. And I want to know how they can help us make those things work before we take any sort of concrete action. Does anybody on Public Planning Committee disagree with that or has an alternate approach?
I'm not sure I have an alternate approach, David. I just, I gave a lengthy comment and I kind of stand by what I had to say there. I do agree with you that lowering our speeds in general on the asphalt and is a really great idea. And I think and I understand that e-bikes, according to the state, are bikes. And I love the idea of the island-wide ambassadors being out being or welcoming and assisting hosts and hostesses. I don't have anything really else to.
I was really focusing.
Of it.
I was really trying to focus on, we do not take action today other than to give staff the instructions to make this entire slideshow available to, and make an effort to get it to the bike shops, requesting their written responses and suggestions with an emphasis on creating a partnership with them to make this work.
David, I think it's a very sensible approach and I support it.
All right, thank you. Alex, you okay with that?
I'm okay with it.
Okay, then let's just go ahead. Diane, thank you, and sorry there isn't a concrete action taken today, but we will move this forward when we are all comfortable. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You're welcome.
Okay, lastly, an update on the short-term rental ordinance initiative. Chris, Ann, and Sean are available. Who is going to make a presentation or summarize comments, the update?
Yes, sir, Mr. Ames, it's Ann Siren. I'll be presenting. Thank you. All right, give me just a second. I will share my screen. I will give you a brief update on the short-term rental initiative, focusing on the areas that have been updated since you received this presentation. We see here the purpose statement is to create a balance between the interests of short-term rentals and residents. We're here in the process, in the public outreach and data development stage of this project. You can see here our stakeholder meetings to date. We just had 2 more yesterday with Sea Pines Resort and a group of vacation rental industry experts. You'll receive those comments shortly. We have future meetings scheduled for January. One of those dates is below. The rest will be made public shortly. We received a lot of interest from short-term rental owners. So we'll be holding 2 virtual meetings for those short-term rental owners to provide input. The dates there on the screen, we published those yesterday and are pushing those out and publicizing them so that folks that know that they have the option and the opportunity to participate.
And may I jump in? Ann, is there a possible opportunity to get another virtual meeting set up for any lingering residents to also participate who may at this time, since we're be away and need to would like to join in on a virtual meeting?
Sure.
Is there any? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
I
we can
appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. We can create a public open, have a couple of in-person public open houses, but we can definitely look at a virtual option just for the general public. Be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yep, we've got 2 in-person open houses scheduled for January. And again, similar to these stakeholder meetings, this is an opportunity for staff to explain the initiative and get feedback from folks. These meeting dates are published on the town website. We'll keep that up to date. We also just published the online survey that'll be open until January 31st, and we'll send you the feedback from that survey. We'll be promoting this in every opportunity we have, including social media posts. We're looking at doing media appearances. We have e-subscription service just for the short-term rental initiative. We'll let people know about that. Regarding data development, we are pursuing that contract to give you a better understanding of where we are now in terms of short-term rentals. We anticipate having that in January. We have some background information here that was included in the presentation about how that data is gathered. And next steps. Again, we'll finalize the stakeholder meetings in January, get that baseline data for you, and also in January. We'll be monitoring short-term rentals through the business license program and their process, and we'll review the findings with you at a workshop in February or March. Are there any questions I can answer for you?
Committee members? Tammy, you want to lead off?
Actually, no.
Okay.
Someone else can talk.
All right, Alex?
Thanks.
No, I just want to say thank you to Ms. Siren and staff for really getting out into communities so that we can absorb as much comment and concerns as possible. I appreciate the first slide that's getting, I guess, closer to I guess a purpose statement, identifying what our true issue is. So I'm anxious to continue to move forward.
Thank you, Glenn.
And thank you for your report. My only further comment would be that at Finance Committee meet recently, we got a report that the town has already registered some 9,700 short-term rental properties. And so there is good compliance with that qualification for a business license for those businesses. And so that means that we are going to be able to, in fact, monitor this as we're going forward. I look forward to further developments. Thank you.
Thank you. And good job. I appreciate it, the work that staff has been doing. In watching our process of trying to get public input, I think we're getting better and better at doing it. But what concerns me is, does enough of the public hear what's being said so that they're not surprised when council actually establishes an ordinance? And I don't know what the answer to that question is, but as you get to the point where you are able to consolidate pros and cons of the public's input, I think that would be important to somehow publish. Maybe it's on one of our town hall e-letters. But I think we have to be very deliberate in trying to get those opinions out into the community so that the decisions by council are made in the context of all those thoughts. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you. And
Can I jump in now? Since
yes.
Okay,
so
so
I'm sorry.
just collecting my thoughts on it, because there's so much to discuss here. And, I realize this was a brief overview, but David, I think you hit on what, for this piece of it, what is something stands out, which there have been a lot of opportunities virtually, in person, and the rest for investors and those who rent their homes to be providing a lot of input. So more opportunity for residents in any way. And that's why I brought up the virtual. Is there more that we can do to bring those voices in? That's going to be critically important, because those are the ones that have brought us to having this as a discussion on an agenda item and moving it forward. And hopefully, right, that we're moving it forward at a speed that by this coming season, summer rental season, we'll have some pieces of this in place to be able to alleviate some of the dislocation that our residents have been experiencing. I think the statement of need has been made clear if you're listening to the residents on the island and how this is impacting the quality of their life throughout the year, but most especially during the height of that summer season. And so having said that, there are a number of reasons that we want to get these folks' input. I'll have a great discussion and line up what we can to help provide some relief for them. So thank you for that. And that's really all I had to say with this piece of it that we're talking about today.
Thank you, Tammy. And with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting with a hearty, happy holidays to all. Be healthy and happy in the new year. And thanks very much for your staff's assistance in all of this, council's participation, and certainly all the citizens of the island. Happy New Year.
All the best to all.
Stay safe.